They say that baseball is a game of inches, but for me, it's a game of miles. 1,100 miles to be exact. This July, I'm headed to the birthplace of our country to see if I can find my own independence, one baseball stadium at a time. Episode 9, The Double-Digit Breakthrough, begins now. If you've been following my blog, Rebuilding Rob, or if you know me in the real world, you know that baseball is one of the few true passions of my life. I can ramble on forever about it. For my money, baseball is the greatest sport ever invented. But lately, I've realized that my love for the game is tied directly to the academic calendar. You see, as a student, myself as a kid, then as a college student, and now as a teacher, my life has always rotated upon the academic school year calendar. That being said, summer has always been the ultimate endgame. It's the finish line. The start of baseball means the start of better weather, longer days, and warmer air. In fact, it's safe for me to say that there are few places that I'd rather be on this planet than inside the four walls of a ballpark. I've never been a huge traveler or a ballpark chaser by trade. If I was somewhere and a game was going, I'd go. But over the last 3 seasons, I've made a concerted effort to make trips strictly for attending games at Major League Baseball stadiums. For the most part, Kid 2 has been my ride or die on those games, but there have been a few that I've attended solo. As of today, I have seen games in or toured 15 Major League Baseball stadiums. 4 of those stadiums are ghosts now. 3 of them are no longer standing. 1 has been repurposed into a football stadium. And speaking of that one that has been repurposed into a football stadium, that's the first one I'm going to talk briefly about, Turner Field in Atlanta, Georgia. As I mentioned, Georgia State University plays their college football games there now. The park itself was serviceable, but honestly, it felt kind of average. If I was grading it, I would give it a C, as a teacher. Now, originally, Turner Field did serve as the track and field stadium for the 1996 Summer Olympics that were held in Atlanta. Immediately after the games, the stadium was quickly converted into a baseball park. A lot of the seats that they had for the track and field events were actually temporary bleachers, and then they were moved out. In fact, if you look at this aerial shot of Turner Field, you can even see the ovular footprint and get a pretty good idea of where the track and field stadium once stood. Next on my list of retired ballparks is the Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I saw this one time while Guillaume was living out in St. Paul. Made a trip out to see him, saw a couple of games where the Twins played the Tigers. But going to a game there felt like I was attending a baseball game inside the Pontiac Silverdome. Artificial turf, and I mean the old school AstroTurf that was essentially carpet. And the Metrodome was a multi-purpose stadium, so the seating was really configured more for football than it was for baseball. And then what they would do is they would actually put up big plastic baggies over some of the seating in the outfield, and it felt very, plastic. It felt like you were watching a game inside of a Ziploc bag. The Teflon roof that the building had made it brutally hot during the summer. Next up, we're kind of upgrading the game a little bit. Old Yankee Stadium. I visited there in the spring of 2002, just a few months after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. X2 wanted to go to a meeting for Teach for America, which is an organization that gets people from other professions into the teaching field. At that time, I think she just wanted to get into the classroom as soon as possible, so she was willing to do something like that. I had no interest in going to the meeting. I had no interest in moving to New York City. So I said, I'm going to the Yankee game. So I hopped on a subway and I made the trip out to the Bronx. I must have been doing something right because I had other tourists actually asking me for directions. But to put it simply, Old Yankee Stadium was nostalgic. It was a classic. And being there, seeing how the Yankees kind of run things as an organization, they are truly a class act. I will say about that old stadium, as I did sit in the upper deck, those upper deck seats were quite steep. Not quite as steep as what we see at Guaranteed Rate Field now in Chicago, but they were pretty bad. And finally, last but certainly not least on my list of retired or extinct ballparks is Tiger Stadium in Detroit, Michigan. This is my sentimental favorite. The corner of Michigan and Trumbull. Sometimes it came to be known simply as the corner. I was lucky enough to be at Tiger Stadium for the final game in 1999. And even though that happened 16 years before the old man passed away, that is one of the last particularly great memories that I have of him, and I will cherish that memory for the rest of my life. It's kind of odd for me to think now, looking back, but I'm 52, and this year the Tigers are playing their 27th season in Comerica Park. So at this point, I have crossed that threshold where the Tigers have actually played more games in Comerica Park in more seasons than they played at Old Tiger Stadium, at least while I was alive. In the early 1990s, the game of baseball changed, maybe irrevocably, with the advent of the modern classic ballpark era, or the retro ballparks as people call them. This push was started by Camden Yards in Baltimore. When they originally built Camden Yards, they were touting it as a Back to the Future type stadium. It was going to have all of the modern amenities and some of the stylistic aesthetics that harkened back to the stadiums of yesteryear, like the brick walls and the wrought iron gates and the old style analog clock on the main scoreboard, things of that sort. Since then, there have been dozens of replacement retro ballparks for almost every major league team at this point. But whether we're talking about one of the old, true jewel box bandboxes of the game, or if we're talking about these, as I call them, spaghetti strainers that are basically these stadiums with retractable roofs, or if I'm talking about the modern open-air gems like PNC Park, I've realized that if I'm going to chase ballparks as such, I need to lay down some ground rules for my mission. Now, I am a part of the Facebook group called Ballpark Chasers, and most people around there will say simply, your chase, your rules. So here are some of the rules that I have come up with for myself personally. Number 1, physical presence. I have to set foot inside a stadium for either a game or for a tour. It's not enough for me to just say, oh yeah, I stood outside the ballpark. Or for me to say, oh, well, I went to the Mall of America in Minneapolis once, so technically I can say that I was on the site of Old Metropolitan Stadium. It doesn't work that way, at least not in my book. Number 2, I go by the 4.5 inning rule. A game is only official for me if I stay through the bottom of the 5th inning, or through the top of the 5th if the home team is winning. If that sounds familiar, that's because that is the official regulation rule for a game. So if there is a rain out or some sort of cancellation due to inclement weather or whatnot, what the league looks at is if a game has been played at least through 4.5 innings and the home team is winning, then they count that as an official game. As such, I count a minimum of 4.5 innings at a ballpark as an official visit. Number 3, the digital record. For me, if it shows up on the official MLB Ballpark app, then it counts. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. But last March, I went on a tour of Busch Stadium in St. Louis. And because now, ever since COVID, MLB has you buy tickets not just for the games, but even for the ballpark tours inside the MLB Ballpark app, Busch Stadium and the tour that I did shows up as an official ballpark visit. So for me, it counts. That is, of course, until I get there to actually see a game. Number 4, the evidence. If I'm at a game, I need photos. Not just of the stadium, but of me inside the stadium. Maybe me in front of some of the artifacts or some of the sculptures or something that makes that stadium, indicative of the hometown and the home team. All right? When I went to Guaranteed Rate Field a couple years back on the south side of Chicago, my phone died about halfway through the game. So At some point, I would like to get back there just because I feel like I have some unfinished business with getting photos of me inside the ballpark. And number 5, a souvenir. Typically, what I get as a souvenir is either one of those logo baseballs that have, the team logo on it. Usually they're like $10 or something. Or if I can, I will get a ball that has the stadium logo on it. In some cases, I'm lucky enough to find one that has on one side the team logo and on the other side the stadium logo. But that is my one souvenir that I get at every game. Now, I have heard some people will actually buy like an authentic hat, or if they've got a little bit more money, they will buy an authentic jersey for every stadium that they visit. I'm doing this on a teacher's salary, so I don't have the funds to do that. The other thing I do like to get are the old paper schedules, the little pocket schedules that unfortunately seem to be kind of fading more and more into oblivion lately. I've been to 2 Detroit Tiger games this year at Comerica Park, and I have yet to see a 2026 pocket schedule, but I'm holding out hope still. For years, my ballpark count has been a series of happy accidents. I mentioned earlier that I saw Busch Stadium. The whole reason I did that was because I happened to make a trip out to St. Louis to visit Missouri Tech with Kid 1. A couple of years ago, Kid 2 and I visited Truist Park in Atlanta, Georgia. We did that because Kid 1 had a gymnastics tournament in Atlanta at the time. So, I'm a chaser by proximity for the most part, not priority. But that's changed in the last couple of years. I've started to venture out a little bit more, making trips to Chicago, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, just to do nothing other than visit the park. But this summer, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm taking it to the next level. This summer, I'm planning a trip, what I'm calling the I-95 road trip. I plan to hit Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. And for me, this will be my double-digit breakthrough, hence the title of today's episode. Those 3 parks, Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia, the home of the Phillies, will be Active Stadium number 10. Camden Yards will be number 11, the home of the Baltimore Orioles. This one will be a full circle moment for me because back in 2001, in the fall, I did a stadium tour, but now I'm going to be able actually to credit a live game in person as part of it. Fun fact about that stadium tour I did, it was actually the day of Game 7 of the 2001 World Series. I remember touring Camden Yards, and then I got back on the road to drive back to Michigan, and I listened to Game 7 of the 01 World Series that night on the radio. Great game, by the way. But I digress. Nationals Park in Washington, D.C. will be number 12. I'm kind of looking forward to this one because Nationals Park actually looks like it's not so much a retro ballpark, but it's kind of more of the modern aesthetic that some of the newer stadiums are starting to go to. They're still incorporating some of the old-timey elements into it, but for the most part, the outside is made mostly of glass as opposed to brick and things like that, and wrought iron fences and whatnot. For me, this trip is pure self-indulgence. There's no college tours attached, there's no gymnastics meets attached. It's just me, the road, and the game. And right now, a recent update indicates that it will probably be Kid 2 riding with me again as my ride or die to check off these 3 more stadiums. At 52, I feel like I've earned the right to chase something just because it makes me happy. It is a 1,200-mile reminder to me that my joy is worth the trip. I know that ballpark chasing isn't everyone's cup of tea, but it for me is my personal travel fix. After I hit all 30 here in North America, which I hope to do someday, I'm kind of looking even further. I'd like to ultimately see games in Puerto Rico, maybe in Japan, maybe even in South Korea if I manage to pull it off someday. Those are kind of more like distant bucket list ideas that are out on the other side of the horizon. Remember, rebuilding isn't about just surviving. It's about having the audacity to look at the horizon and see where you're going next. This episode of Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, was produced, edited, written, and hosted by yours truly, your favorite blogger, a guy named Rob. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I'm well aware that, like me, you have a ton of podcast listening options available, so I'm honored that you decided to spend a little bit of your day here with me. Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, can be found wherever you get your favorite podcast. Of course, you probably figured that part out already, or else you wouldn't be listening to me right now. And if you're interested in more insight into this perfectly ordinary, non-gunning white guy, feel free to check out my blog at rebuildingrob.com. So until next time, this is Rob, reminding you to be audacious, be bold, and be brave. Be strong enough to be gentle, and remember, the rebuild never ends. Bye, everybody.